everyone. Welcome to our 7th annual celebrating Arab American Heritage Month. أهلا ومرحبا بكم. This is our, now I'm switching between Arabic and English. I don't know which language I'm speaking now. أهلا ومرحبا بكم في احتفالنا السنوي السابع بشهر التراث العربي. My name is Ines Al-Hanafi. I coordinate Arab American Heritage Month at the college. I'm really so delighted to be with you all today. Montgomery County, some background information. Montgomery County recognized April as Arab American Heritage Month since 1999, and the college has continued this tradition. We welcome the opportunity to recognize Arab and Arab American and their contribution to our community. Also to address their issues and concerns, to build cultural bridges and promote understanding between the diverse groups that make up this mosaic that is Montgomery County. I warmly inviting you to enjoy this event. Our theme for this event, for the program of the April, for the whole month, is Let's Give Peace a Chance, Voices of Courage, Willpower for a Change, unified visions of a world transformed. Our topic for today is Getting It Right, Bridging the Divide Through Knowledge and Engagement, which really tied and connected with Dr. Zogby's new book. Today we have with us two special guest speakers, Senator Jim Zogby and Dr. Jim Zogby. Both of these individuals, in their own way, have taken steps to bring about change and to initiate change that will result in bridging or bringing peace and bridging peace between countries, communities, and individuals. We are grateful that they are going to share with us their experiences today, and we're really appreciative that they're giving us this opportunity.
Good evening. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, the Montgomery College President, Dr. Darian Pollard, and the Vice President Provost of Rockville Campus, Dr. Judy Ackerman, welcome to Montgomery College and welcome to the Rockville campus. Before we get too far in this program, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who worked behind the scenes and worked tirelessly to line up our guest speakers for tonight. And let's give a special round of applause to all those people, and especially Ines El-Hanafi. Thank you for your service. Montgomery College serves more than 60,000 students a year through its 3 main campuses and various workforce and business development locations. At Montgomery College, we're fortunate to have a diverse workforce and an incredibly diverse student body. In fact, we have students from more than 170 different countries. For the sake of comparison, the United Nations has 192 countries represented. So we've got a mini UN here on campus. And that's a great thing. At our Germantown campus, 26% of the student population comes from foreign countries. On the Rockville campus, 31% come from foreign countries. And at the Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus, 38% of the student body comes from foreign campuses. And each of our campuses, of course, has several thousand students. When you add in college employees and the various visitors we have to our campuses on a daily basis, these campuses become like little cities. Because our population is so diverse and because we work and learn together in such close proximity, we have to be respectful of one another if we want to live in harmony. We have to be aware of the cultural differences that exist between groups. And one way to become aware is through direct experience or interaction with a different group. We call that experiential learning. But another huge factor, and one that we obviously emphasize as a college, involves formal education. Education about different countries and their respective histories is vital to improving our knowledge and understanding. Education about religious differences is also vital in that effort. And education about cultural differences is vital to improving our knowledge and understanding of each other. We gather here tonight to celebrate and recognize some of our differences, and we gather here to listen and to learn. We are fortunate to have a celebrated scholar and author, Dr. Jim Zogby, with us tonight. I'm looking very forward to hearing what he has to say. But first, I have the pleasure of introducing and welcoming Senator James Rosa Pep. Here are a few things you should know about the senator. First, he was a member of the House of Delegates for 10 years. In 1997, President Clinton came calling. President Clinton asked Senator Rosa Pep to join his administration as the U.S. ambassador to Romania. And in 2001, Governor Glendening appointed him to the Board of Regents for the University System of Maryland. Currently, Senator Rosa Pep represents District 21, which includes Prince George's County and Anne Arundel County. Among other things, he serves as the Senate Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. In addition, he is the Senate Chair of the Joint Information Technology and Biotechnology Committee and the Joint Audit Committee. Senator Rosa Pep was born in Italy, and he has championed opportunities for Marylanders of all heritages. In fact, he served on a task force that focused on the preservation of heritage languages, language skills in Maryland. He's known to be an aggressive champion for Maryland schools. In summary, he's an individual who is truly committed to education and diversity, and he has demonstrated that through his numerous years of service. And we are glad to have him here tonight. Everyone, please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Senator Jim Rosa Pep.
Thank you very much, Dr. Campton. Thanks to all you for being here this evening. It is really an honor. I'm a Maryland State Senator. I work in Washington, D.C., and I see a lot of people. And I have to tell you, when I'm in a store, or I'm on the street, or at a meeting, or in a restaurant, and I meet an immigrant, a young immigrant, and I say, "Oh, where are you from?" And they tell me where they're from. And I said, "Do you go to school?" And they say, "Yeah, I go to school." And I say, "Where do you go to school?" 90% of the time, it's Montgomery College. It is an honor to be here. This college is leading the nation in including people from all over the world, from all backgrounds and all heritages, in the promise of American life. So it's an honor to be here, and thank you for inviting me to be with you today. I was ambassador to Romania, as Dr. Campton said, and the president of Romania, when I was there, was an academic. He had studied law undergraduate under the communist period, and then he became a judge. In much of Europe, you become a judge like right out of law school, which is a little weird for us in America to try to understand. But he became a judge, and it was a communist period, and he figured out pretty quickly that being a judge in a communist system wasn't all that interesting because they told you how you were going to rule. So he went back to school and got a PhD in geology and taught geology at the University of Bucharest for his career, worked his way up, became chairman of the department, came here after the revolution with the fall of communism in Eastern Europe, taught at Duke University for a term. By the time I got there as ambassador, he was the president of Romania. And he loved to tell this story. He said, in his experience, there are two kinds of Americans. One kind think America's the greatest country in the world. They think things in America work really well. They're very proud of their country. And when they travel around the world to other countries, they don't understand why it doesn't work just like it does in the United States. And then there's another kind of American. They think America's the greatest country in the world. They think America, things work very well. And they're very proud of the United States. And when they travel around the world, They're intrigued and excited about what they learn from other people and other cultures. And you and I know that's exactly right. The beauty of our country is that we don't have to travel around the world to learn from other people and other cultures. People come to us. As President Kennedy said, we're a nation of immigrants. People come here and teach us other ways of understanding the world, other ways of cooking, other approaches to art and to science and to culture. We're the luckiest people in the world. People come to us. Dr. Campen mentioned that I sponsored the legislation several years ago to create the Task Force on Heritage Language Preservation. Because one of the areas where we're very lucky, you know, there's a lot of discussion about Americans. There are people who are bilingual and trilingual, and what's somebody who's monolingual? That's an American. And so we have the opportunity, because we have immigrants from so many parts of the world, 170, I guess, here at Montgomery College, where people bring their languages with them. They're bilingual or trilingual before they get here. And so they bring that to our country. And so we passed a law. We're the first state in the United States to set up a plan for preserving heritage languages. I was born in Italy, and I don't speak much Italian, to tell you the honest to God truth. What a loss for me. What a loss for our country. So we said, let's look at what we're doing. How can we preserve heritage languages? And so I won't bore you with the details, but there are a variety of areas, making it easier for heritage language speakers who have skills in their own languages and teaching to be able to teach in our schools, to make it easier for children who study in private schools with their churches or their community to be able to get credit in the high schools. A lot of areas. Well, one of the things that came out of this, which I'm very excited about, is Maryland was the only state in the country that in their application to the federal government for the Race to the Top funds. The Race to the Top funds is President Obama's initiative to try to improve our schools, $5 billion of federal money to help states improve their public schools. Maryland was the only state that put in its application for Race to the Top funds money for world languages. And we got the award. We got $250 million for our Race to the Top project. And the 3 languages that are targeted in our program are Chinese, Hindi, and Arabic. Now to the more upbeat part of the program. I have the honor, and it really is an honor, to introduce Dr. Jim Zogby. Dr. Zogby is what we Italian Americans would call a Renaissance man. He's a distinguished academic, PhD from the Department of Religion at Temple University. He's an author. You'll hear much more about that tonight, and you'll have a chance to buy his book and have him autograph it for you and for all your friends and all your relatives and all your neighbors. He's a television talk show host. He has a weekly television show that is broadcast all over the Middle East and all over South Asia. He's an organizer. 25 years ago, he created the Arab American Institute, which is the driving force in the United States for Arab Americans to have a voice in their schools, in their community, in their states, in business, in labor, in our country. And he's a political leader. I met Dr. Zogby about 20 years ago in politics. I'm a Democrat, he's a Democrat. There is one man who Bill Clinton went to when he wanted to understand the Arab world. There's one man he went to when he wanted to understand the Arab American community. There's one man he went to when he wanted to understand what we call as Italians and Arabs, the Mediterranean world. And that's Dr. Zogby. Today, he's a member of the executive committee of the Democratic National Committee. He's on the boards of the ACLU and Human Rights Watch and national and international organizations who advocate for human rights in our country and around the world. And there's one man who Barack Obama goes to when he wants to know about the Arab world, and wants to know about the Arab American community, and he wants to know about the Mediterranean American community, and that is Dr. Jim Zogby. More important than that, he's my friend. He's a very good friend. He's a very good man, Dr. Jim Zogby.
That was very special, Jim, and thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me tonight. I love what you're doing here in this program. My book is called Arab Voices, What They're Saying to Us and Why It Matters. And I want to start, if I could, with the why it matters and why programs like this matter. You could start with it's a nice thing to do to understand other cultures, and we all live together, we might as well understand each other. But the Middle East is a special place for America, because since the end of Vietnam, we've sent more money and sent more weapons, and we've sent more troops, and we've fought more wars, and we lost more lives in the Middle East than anywhere else in the world. We've also have more economic interests at risk in that region than anywhere else in the world. We also have allies at risk in that part of the world. And we also have the situation where every U.S. president since Jimmy Carter has had his presidency defined, success or failure, by issues that have evolved in the Middle East, whether blunders that we've made or events that have spun out of control, or wars that have occurred that we became party to in one way or another. The fact is that it is critical for us to understand the Middle East because we're so deeply invested, because our future as a country depends upon our getting it right in that region. And yet, for the most part, we don't have a clue. We're like blind people in a dark room when it comes to the Middle East, tripping over our feet and not understanding the region we're in. I mean, on the policy level, for sure. We went into Iraq, and the lie about Iraq was not weapons of mass destruction, incidentally. The lie about Iraq was it'd be over in 6 days. The lie in Iraq was in 6 months we'd be out of there. The lie in Iraq was it'll only cost us $1 to $2 billion. These all came from people like Paul Wolfowitz. These were leaders in the administration said this. It'd cost $1–2 billion, and then the Iraqi oil would kick in, and we wouldn't have to pay any more for it. Or that there would be flowers in the street, and Iraqis would celebrate us as liberators, and democracy would bloom and become, in the words of the president, a beacon that would light the whole Middle East. That was the lie. And when people told him that there might be sectarian conflict, they called it a pipe dream. They poo-pooed it. They said, these are just the naysayers saying this. This is overrated stuff. We tried to get a resolution passed in the Democratic Party because it's not a one-party problem. Both parties are at fault in this regard. I tried to get a resolution in the Democratic Party before the war saying you don't go into the war unless we know the costs, consequences in terms of commitment, unless you know the history and culture of the country in which you are sending young men and women to fight. And I was told that it was out of order. We were not going to debate that issue. We were standing shoulder to shoulder with the president. And we wanted to get over this one so we could get onto the hot button stuff like Social Security and Medicare, et cetera. We never got onto Social Security and Medicare because we got stuck on Iraq, and we're still stuck on Iraq. And it is a drain of our treasury, but it's a drain of human life, and it's a drain of prestige. The war that was to make us stronger in the world has made us weaker in the world because we did not know the country we were fighting in. We had no concept of the consequences in the broader region of fighting this war. That's on the national, but how did we get there? It's because we didn't know. And therefore, we got sold a bill of goods. When National Geographic, about a month before the war started, did a survey of the American public, you know what they found? They found 11% could find Iraq on a map. In 2009, they repeated the same survey, and the number jumped to 37%, which means we'd been fighting that war for 6 years. We lost 4,000 men and women at that point, and only 37% of our people could find it on a map. When you ask Americans, why do Arabs dislike us? 80% say because Arabs hate our values. But we've polled on this issue consistently in the Middle East. We find 65% of Arabs like our values. 60% of Americans think Iran's an Arab country. It's not. Almost the same number think that Pakistan's an Arab country. It's not. Less than a third of Americans know the year that Israel fought its war of independence. And it goes on and on. Almost a bewildering sense of ignorance about the region. And why? Well, I mean, I could actually go a little further and say, if you look at Newsweek a couple weeks ago, most Americans don't know the Bill of Rights or even what it is. You know, so it was easy for the Bush administration to sort of get rid of most of the Bill of Rights because we didn't know we were losing any rights because we didn't know the Bill of Rights and what it provided. Right to bear arms we knew, but not much else. Not much else. Onion had a funny article called Ashcroft Pares Down Bill of Rights to a Tidy 4. But most people couldn't name the 6 that were at risk and probably couldn't name the 4 that were being protected. And so our educational system is what's at fault here because we don't learn. I mean, don't learn Arabic in grade school, don't learn Middle East history or Arab culture or the rest in grade school or in high school. I mean, the Middle East Studies Association, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs and others have done repeated studies on our textbooks. And what they find is just an absence of basic knowledge, so central to understanding a part of the world where we're so deeply engaged. I see some folks out there who look like they're my age, and so you will remember the textbook we used. I used to call it, in our high school book, I used to call it Stone Age Man to Ike, because it actually started with Stone Age Man, it ended up with Ike. And Stone Age Man was in southern France. That we used to teach that in Stone Age Man, southern France. Had to be a white guy, right? Because God could not possibly have made the first guy in Africa. I mean, what was he thinking, you know? So it was a European guy, and then it went to the Greeks and the Romans, and then after that it was to the Holy Roman Empire, and then it was the Dark Ages, and then it went from the Dark Ages to the Renaissance, and from the Renaissance to the emergence of the nation state, and then America. And so it started there, and it ended here, and it was a straight line history, and it was European history. Now, the Arabs factored in one place. There was always a picture of 2 pyramids and a guy and a camel in front of them. Now, I think now, in hindsight, that was product placement. The Camel cigarette said, nobody's going to know what the hell the pack is if you don't put that picture there. And the section about it, was not about guys on camels or even the pyramids. The section about it was on Bedouin life. It was like 2 or 3 paragraphs in this otherwise big chapter on the world. The fact that there really wasn't a dark ages in human history, but what happened was trade routes moved from north to south. And as they moved from north to south, knowledge went from north to south, as did advances in science, technology, art, architecture, etc., moved north-south. And so Plato and Aristotle moved south and got translated into Arabic, and advances were made in philosophy and in art and in all of these areas of whom, and wealth was accumulated in the south, and libraries and universities were built, and Egypt and Spain became glorious civilizations, and Europe went into what we call the Dark Ages. But what brought Europe out of the Dark Ages was the trade routes moved north. And when the trade routes moved north, it wasn't as if somebody said, oh my God, these books that used to be around, you know, like 1,000 years ago, I found them again. They came back from the south to the north. There was a continuity in human understanding and in learning and in science and development of knowledge, but it went from north to south and back north again. And so much of what became the Renaissance has its origins in Arab and Islamic civilization. I mean, and even later, Baroque music comes from the Islamic aesthetic. And so, I mean, you could go on and on with the things that we took for granted as part of European culture, which has sprung up in that transfer of knowledge back north again. Now, China was in the books too, and it was a section on Marco Polo, and it had the what do you call it, the Great Wall of China. That was the picture. That was the picture they'd have, the Great Wall of China, because it was so big. You know, anything you can see from the moon, you gotta somehow you ought to put a picture of it. There were no cigarettes. Great Wall cigarettes. Smoke them. They're good. But the Marco Polo story to me was always interesting, because Marco Polo is to China what Christopher Columbus is to America, right? It was like Marco Polo discovered China, but it wasn't lost. They're both Italian, and here's the interesting thing: if it hadn't been for Marco Polo or Columbus, what would y'all be eating? Exactly. There'd be no tomatoes and there'd be no noodles, and it's awful hard to make spaghetti. And you know, it's interesting about the Lebanese, because we love our cuisine and we love to talk about our cuisine. If it weren't for the Mongols, I don't know what we'd be eating. We'd be eating grains and meat and cheese and you know, I mean, the things we stuff and the things we roll and the vegetables we chop up, those come from the Mongols. And they brought them east to west. Marco Polo didn't find it, the Mongols brought it. And so the continuity of the fact that there is a human story of interconnectedness passes us by. And so it's our story. I was in Britain just about a month ago, and I went to the Foreign Office to give a lecture on the book. And the guy from the Foreign Office who was bringing me into the building, he said, I got to show you something. He said, I'd love to show people this. It's a mural at the top of the steps of the East India Wing, which they still call it the East India Wing. And we get to the top of the stairs, and there at the top of the stairs is a mural about the size of that whole big thing there. And at one side of the mural, it's Victoria, and she's half naked, sitting on the clouds, arms outstretched. And on the other side of the clouds are a black, brown, yellow, and red person holding platters of goods, wealth, riches, the treasures of the East and the South, bringing them all for you, Victoria. That's how we saw ourselves too. We were the fulfillment of all of that, the inheritors of all of that. Their story is only important as much as it's a part of our story. That's how we taught it, and that's how we learned it. And so their story became irrelevant. Their story became inconsequential to our understanding of ourselves because they had nothing to do with it. Really, that's how we saw it. And so we didn't learn about the Arabs because it wasn't important to learn about the Arabs. Didn't learn about the Chinese or the Africans either. It was the dark continent, remember? Nothing happened down there except Tarzan, white guy. And that was the story, and that's how we saw it and understood it. And when you don't know something, what you do is you tend to, it's a normal human thing, you tend to try to understand what you don't know through the prism of what you do know. So when we were going into Iraq, we saw it of necessity, because we had no knowledge of Iraqi history. We saw it through the prism of World War II. We were going to liberate Baghdad as we liberated Berlin. And they were going to cheer for us as they did in Germany, and it was going to be like I don't know how many times in the Arab world I've heard this, what's Gedank's thing? It was like everything was like everything in the Arab world that happened from Tunisia and Egypt, it became it was seen through the prism of the fall of the Iron Curtain. It's the only way we could understand it. And when Iraq went bad, we saw it through the prism of Vietnam. Because again, it was, no, Baghdad's not Vietnam. It's not Germany. It wasn't Japan. It's Iraq. And as our guys were walking down the street, and we were seeing them as the American liberating army in Germany, but Iraqis and Arabs were looking at it and saying, they're like the Mongols, which was the first civilization to come and sack Baghdad and occupy the country. And I said that to a reporter one time, and he said, what do the Mongols have to do with it? What? And I said, you can't understand Iraq unless you understand the Mongols and what they did and how they see their history through their own prism. We're not the Mongols, but they weren't the Germans. And we had no clue, as they had no clue about us. But we were the ones occupying. And because we don't know, and because we're forced, therefore, to see things through prisms that don't fit, but we sort of force-fit information into that storyline, we end up seeing the world either through that prism or through stereotypes which end up defining that reality, the one we don't know. And as far as the Arab world is concerned, the popular culture which creates those stereotypes has been devastating to understanding. I mean, I did studies back in the 80s of how television, for example, portrayed Arabs. And it was, I surveyed every show on what at the time were the three major networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS. Didn't find a single positive portrait of an Arab. What I found were terrorists and oil sheikhs. Now, are there terrorists? Of course there are. And are there oil sheikhs? Of course there are. But, you know, Ahmed, the doctor in Egypt who gets up in the morning and delivers 2 babies and then goes to his clinic in the afternoon, he's not a story. But if he straps a bomb on, we read about him. I mean, we don't know people. They're not the subject of a TV show. I went and presented that to all the networks. ABC dismissed it, CBS dismissed it. NBC was very serious about it. And they introduced me to somebody that I've discovered now as I talk about him that almost nobody knows who he is, Bruce Paltrow, who, if I say he's the father of Gwyneth Paltrow, he was one of the great television directors and creators of great programming. He did a show called St. Elsewhere that some of you may have heard of, or The White Hope, a very powerful drama about a basketball coach in an inner city school. And Paltrow was very impressed with the study, and he said, I got to fix this. Because any hospital in America has Arab doctors in them. I mean, the Arab world thinks there's too many of them. It's the brain drain. They want them back. But there are Arab doctors everywhere, but you never see one on an American television show about hospitals. So when I told that to Bruce Paltrow, he said, I've got to put a doctor in St. Elsewhere. So he said, let me work with you on it. And he worked with me to create a character by introducing me to his 3 writers. So I sat with the writers, and they said, tell me what we need to know, and I told them about the whatever, and we went through the whole thing. And he said, 3 weeks from now, I'm going to give you a write-up. I'll send you a write-up. And here's what he sent me. Limousine pulls up, a stretch limousine pulls up in front of St. Elsewhere. Okay? And guy comes out, and in the script it said, he has sheets on. Now, he didn't mean Ku Klux Klan. What he meant was an Arab thawb, which, number one, like, you know, Arab doctors in America don't wear sheets. I mean, it's like, not the ones I know anyway. And actually, I've never seen one here in a hospital. Scrubs, maybe, but... So he pulls up, he gets out of the thing, he goes up the steps, and he goes into the gift shop. And when he gets into the gift shop, first thing he does is he finds Playboy magazine, which is the second big problem in the show, because there's no Playboy magazine in hospital gift shops, especially ones with the name St. Elsewhere. I mean, you're not going to find it. So he opens the thing, and he looks at it, and he says, I like this, we do not have it in my country. And so I said, oh, I read the whole rest of it, and I called the guy up, and I said, this isn't going to work. And he said, why? I mean, I said, it's a stereotype. You've used the stereotypes, too many of them. He said, this is what he said. He said, I had to make the character believable. And so, we fought about it for a while. He wasn't giving. He said, if I do the character you want me to do, nobody's going to believe him, and it won't work. It won't sell. And what I learned is that Hollywood is not going to change the stereotypes because they depend upon the stereotypes to sell shows. They're not going to recreate a reality that matches reality if they don't believe that the public knows that reality. So they have to play with what people think. And so all they end up doing is just reproducing and sort of reinforcing the stereotypes that they created a long time ago. And that becomes knowledge for us. They're the only Arabs we know. And that's the information we work with and operate with. Oh yeah, I know what those people are like. When we do polling, when we say, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Arabs? 85% of Americans say either violence, terrorism, or oil. Those are the three things that they end up telling you. Because that's the image they've got, and not much else. Now, if the popular culture is bad, what's worse is the political culture. Because what the political culture does is it takes the stereotype and then reinforces it doubly and makes it into certitude. When you hear Newt Gingrich talk, there's no space for conversation. Or Rush Limbaugh, there's no space for, it's like, this is it, these are who these people are, let me tell you about them, they're a danger, we've got to deal with them. When we started polling on this issue a decade ago, we found that about 75% of Americans, after we asked them all these questions, we'd say, do you know enough or do you need to know more about Arabs and Muslims? 75% of Americans said, I don't know enough, I need to know more. When we poll today, it's about 50% say, I don't know enough, I need to know more. And you know why? Because there's a partisan split. 73% of Democrats say, I don't know enough, I need to know more. 82% of Republicans say, I know enough, I don't need to know more. When you ask the question, do you have a favorable, unfavorable view of Muslims, 54% of Democrats say favorable, 34% unfavorable. Among Republicans, 12% favorable, 85% unfavorable. It's a situation that has become a problem because it's being exploited as a wedge issue. And when the political culture gets hold of an issue, it goes from a sort of a suggested stereotype that you watch on television into something you then become convinced about. And you now have the authority of political leadership saying this is so. And unfortunately, that's what we're living with right now. Try to build a mosque in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and the town went nuts. It's not a religion. The First Amendment doesn't apply to them. It's a cult based on violence. And so we can't have a church, a mosque here. And we are stuck with this right now. We're fighting wars. We're losing lives. We're trying to be engaged in a part of the world where the rug is being pulled out from under us at home by stereotypes and political certainty that teach us very negative things about the people with whom we're engaged in very difficult ways over there. And as a result of all of this, therefore, the how we see Arabs and what we think about Arabs are a whole series of myths. And I write about them in the book because I think it's important to look at them and sort of explode them, if you will, and get to the bottom of whoever. And how do we do it? If you can't have direct experience, which you actually can, and I believe, and I write about it in the book, I think you actually can get direct experience because Montgomery College is not unique in that regard. I mean, every campus has an Arab student group. Every community has an Arab American community. And they're immigrants and one's born here, and the fact is that there's a level of understanding reachable right here at home, as Senator Rosapep noted, by simply encountering your neighbor and sitting and talking. But because we don't do it, and because we don't travel to the degree that would make us familiar, these myths end up defining how we know. So in order to deal with those myths, we poll. We poll because I look at polling as the respectful science. It's a way you actually go and you talk to 4,000 people. Every point of view is recognized and respected. You write them all down. No one's point of view is wrong. What do Arabs think? We asked 4,000 people, what do you think about this? What is your most important aspiration? What is the thing that matters to you most in life? What do you teach your children? What do you want for your country? Ask Moroccans, what is the thing you most want people in the West to know about Morocco? And they'll tell you. And it's like opening a window. And you hear 4,000 voices yelling at you, telling you, this is what it is, this is what it is. And you sort it all out, and you come up with some interesting things. One of the things we find is that Arabs love their countries. They may not like their governments, but they love their country as much as we love America. I mean, Moroccans will tell you about the glories and the beauties of their history and their civilization and their heritage, and they'll tell you about the gorgeous landscape and the beautiful ocean. And Saudis will tell you about the birthplace of their religion and of the glories of the desert and the pristine purity of the nights in the desert. They'll tell you about the fact that the generosity and hospitality that's a part of their culture is a defining issue in their lives, and on and on. What you find is this incredible diversity. Morocco is not Saudi Arabia, and Egypt is not Lebanon, and the UAE is not Jordan, etc. But you'll also find some very common threads. One of them is that they love the place they're from. There's a pride in place. They're not the monochromatic, two-dimensional people we end up thinking they are. They're actually people like us. And on the issue of there being people like us, you know, the notion we have that they're all just angry all the time. I mean, the picture we get of them is angry, shaking their fists. Reminded me of a neighbor I had in South Central Pennsylvania. We had just moved from Philadelphia. My wife and I and my 2 kids had lived there. I have 5 now, but I had 2 kids then. And we'd moved there. I was teaching at a small college in Central Pennsylvania, and the guy eyed me warily for like a couple days. One day he came over and he said, "Been meaning to ask you something." Like we were in the middle of a sentence or a conversation or something. "Been meaning to ask you something." I said, "Yeah." And he said, you live there?" And I said, "You mean here?" "Yeah, we rent the house." He said, No, Philadelphia." I said, Yeah. He said, "You live there?" I said, Yeah. He said, "With your kids and your wife?" I said, "Yeah, why do you ask?" He said, "Weren't you afraid?" I said, No, what's going on? He said, "People get murdered there every day." "I know, I read it on the news, and I'm reading the papers, I see it on television." He listened to Harrisburg News, or they were getting Philadelphia TV stations, and somebody in Philadelphia got murdered every day. Now, the metro area covers about 4 million people, and you know, it's going to happen. Now, in Carlisle, where we were living at the time, if somebody got murdered every day, there wouldn't be anybody left in Carlisle after a while. So it would be like Cabot Cove, you know, in Murder, She Wrote. It's like poor Jessica, wherever she goes, somebody's getting murdered. And so his thought about his own, I tried to tell him about South Philly and the Italian market, which is actually just like going to Italy almost. I mean, it's an incredible place. Or Lincoln Drive, which is where the black bourgeoisie historically have lived, and it's an incredible, unique culture. Or the Quaker communities of Chestnut Hill. It's a very diverse city. He had none of it. People got murdered there every day, never going there, and I was foolish to have my wife and 2 kids live there. That was all he could see. And it's like the same thing. People will say to me, "I was thinking of going to Cairo. I'd sure like to see the pyramids, but I'm really afraid." Safer to go to Cairo than it is to go to Miami Beach. Safer. There's less violent crime. There's much less murder. I mean, actually, there is almost no city in the world where you go where as many people get murdered as they do here in America. I mean, bottom line, true. I mean, we have 18,000 people get killed with handguns. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And so all we know, though, is the murder. I mean, we judge Cairo, or we judge Beirut or something like that by the incident you read about. It would be the same as judging America by Columbine and Tucson and the guy flying the plane into the tax building and the IRS building and Virginia Tech, and we could go down our list of stuff too. But that's not who we are. And the world knows that that's not who we are because of globalization. They see our television shows. They see all of who we are all the time, but we don't see them at all except when they make news, and the only way they make news is when an act of violence occurs. And so it's angry guys shaking their fist. And so the notion we end up with is that Arabs go to bed at night hating America, wake up in the morning hating Israel, and spend the day in the mosque from listening to some preacher making them hate even more, or watching Al Jazeera, which makes them hate even more. I mean, that's the notion we've got. Now, when we poll, what we find is that what's the number one concern you have? It's not America. It's actually, we all sound like, sometimes, it's like when I hear this stuff, I'm supposed to do Diane Rehm tomorrow, and the first thing they said, we want you to talk about, like, what all this stuff going on in the Arab world, what this all means for Israel, and what it means for America. And I said what I'm going to say to you tonight. I said, it sounds like Sarah Palin after Tucson. You know, it's not about you. And this is a story of what's happening in Egypt right now and whatever. It's not about us. It's about them. It's like they say, well, they're not burning American flags. Yeah, but they're not waving them either. This is about them, not about us. And we don't sort of we almost can't deal with that sometimes. So they go to bed at night actually thinking about their kids and worried about their jobs. And they wake up in the morning thinking about health care and education and whether their parents are going to be able to take care of themselves and whether they're going to have the money to provide for their parents in their old age. They're like us. When we poll, number one concern is jobs in the economy, number two concern is health care, number three concern is education. Almost every Arab country, it's the same three in the top three. Sound familiar? I mean, that's us. And when we see, what do you watch on television? They watch movies, soap operas, dramas. Those are the number 1 and 2 rated shows. And after that come reality shows, etc. I was in Saudi Arabia during the uprising in Tunisia and the fall of the government in Lebanon. And I was sitting there in somebody's house. We were in a living room, about 18 of us watching television. We were going back and forth between Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya. One is a more conservative, less conservative, actually this way, less conservative, more conservative TV shows. You got my hand, the wrong way I went on that one. I call Al Jazeera TV with an attitude. It's sort of like our MSNBC, and it's like they got a point of view, and Arabiya has a point of view too, but it's more the governments. Anyway, they're watching them, and they're going back and forth in an intense debate between the pro-Syrian guys and the pro-Hariri guys and whatever. And all of a sudden, a 28-year-old son comes in the room, and he says, "It's on!" And he gets the remote control, and he turns on Arabs Got Talent, which is a TV show that is wildly popular in the Middle East. And it's sort of like American Idol, but a little gimmickier and funny. And we watched that for an hour, and the debate was as hot and heavy on that one over who should win as it was over the other one. And I defy you, in the middle of whatever crisis is going on in any Arab country, to try to go to somebody's house and have a conversation about something when the World Cup qualifying matches are on. I mean, this is not a people obsessed with politics, not obsessed with America. They're obsessed with things that everybody else is obsessed with. They love to be entertained, and it's actually a funny world, which sort of doesn't compute. If you say Arabs are funny, it doesn't compute with our stereotype. What do you mean they're funny? They're angry. I mean, when you had no clue what was going on in Tahrir Square unless you saw how funny the signs were and how funny the chants were. And the fact that it was a little bit like Woodstock in terms of there was music and there were dancers and there were poetry readings and performances of all kind. That's what they did all night long to entertain themselves. And so they're not all the same, but they are unified around certain central themes. One of which is Palestine, which you can't ignore, and we do. And we just don't get it. That it's a defining issue in Arab culture, in Arab thinking. It defines a sensibility almost that unifies people. And it's a culture profoundly proud of their religions, not just their religion, but their religions, and profoundly proud of their language and their culture. Stuff we don't get all the time. Because we don't, we get into problems like Iraq, or like foreign policy in general, which we just don't. Arabs don't dislike us. When we poll and we say, how do you feel about America? Single digits like us. How do you feel about the American people? 60-something% like us. How do you feel about American culture? 60-something%. How do you feel about American values of freedom and democracy? 65% across the board like it. How do you feel about American policy toward you? It goes down in the single digits. That's what drives the numbers down. One guy said to me, he said, you think we don't like you. We actually love you. He said, but we're convinced you don't like us. And it's the way you treat us. Because at the end of the day, people don't judge you by what you say about yourself. They judge you by how you treat them. And our policies have not reflected our values in that regard. And so getting it right requires understanding. And understanding requires listening. It requires paying attention and trying to learn. Because if you don't listen, you don't learn. If you don't learn, you can't change. And if you can't change, you're stuck doing the same things and making the same mistakes over and over and over again. I remember early on in my career describing some of the work I did as like sitting on a mountaintop watching a train wreck about to happen. I've been doing this work 35 years and I've seen more train wrecks than I care to. It just keeps happening over and over again because basically we just don't learn. And we don't learn because we don't listen. I conclude the book after talking about all the bad stuff with a couple chapters called Getting It Right. And the chapters Getting It Right point to the folks who are actually trying to make a difference. I start with the president in Cairo and his speech 2 years ago, which he acknowledged was never going to do the job. He said, a speech alone does not make change. And he was absolutely right. The speech was great, but it didn't make change. But what the speech did was acknowledge at least an understanding of what the problem was, which no previous president had ever done, which is say, here is the problem. Here is what we've done wrong. I was reading on the way over a couple of things from folks criticizing Obama on this, that, or the other, saying, and one of them was saying he apologized in Cairo. Damn straight he apologized in Cairo, because he understood that if we want to reflect our values, we tortured people. We suborned other governments into rendition policies where we said, okay, we're not torturing this guy, you torture him for us, which only validated their bad behavior. I was in a discussion with a reporter during the uprising in Egypt, and the reporter said to me, oh, you do a lot of polling in the Arab world. What do you think? If we dumped Mubarak, would our favorable rating go up? And I said, no, because you got it backwards. Egyptians, we're not unpopular in Egypt because we supported Mubarak. He's unpopular because he supported our policies. He supported our policy in Iraq. He supported our policy with Gaza and the Israeli strangulation of that little strip of land. He supported the policies on rendition. Egypt became a way station on the road to rendition. And people knew it and didn't like it. And the president understood that fundamental to making change was going to be telling people we're listening and we're hearing what you say, and this is not who we are. What we've done is not who we are. And we've got to, you've got things to do to make it better, we've got things to do to make it better. And the speech deserves being looked at again, as I'm sure it will be on the 2nd anniversary. Looked at in terms of what he held out that he did not do, or maybe could not do, but also in terms of what remains as the agenda that we have to look at. And then there's our foreign aid program. I mean, I come from the age where, when I first got involved in this stuff, our foreign aid program was like the story we tell about the Boy Scout who helped the old lady across the street, except she didn't want to go. You know, it's like we would design programs in the bowels of the USAID office, and we'd sort of give them to people. They said, what are we doing? I remember in Gaza, I did this project for Vice President Gore in the West Bank in Gaza, and one of the first things we did was we built a housing project in Gaza. It was a big deal. It had a big billboard out front. I went to the opening of it, and it had gift from the American people to the people of Gaza. Every unit, the average unit sold at $94,000 a unit, which is cool in Montgomery County. It's like, wow, I want one. But in Gaza, where the per capita income is $600, it wasn't going. It wasn't going. So the billboard was more of a taunt than it was a delivery on something. And nobody asked them, what do you need? What they didn't need was $94,000 apartment units. What they did need were other things, and we weren't giving them because we didn't talk to them. When Hillary Clinton went to Morocco 2 years ago to the Forum of the Future, when she went again this year to Doha to the Forum of the Future, every single program she announced were partnership programs. They're demand-driven. We say, what do you need? What do you want? Let us partner you with somebody here who can help you work to get it done. We're getting it right. American companies and corporations doing business in the Middle East are getting it right. They're our best public diplomats. And they're public diplomats because they sell products that have a certain, not just a value, but a certain flavor of being American. Somebody told me one time, they said the difference between the Japanese, Chinese, Germans, and Americans is that the other three sell products, but you sell a way of life. And people want that way of life. You go to Saudi Arabia right now and you go in the shopping mall, the kids have on jeans and sneakers and basketball jerseys and Yankee baseball hats. And they want a little piece of America. And in the middle of the mall is a Starbucks, and at one end is a Saks Fifth Avenue and a Planet Hollywood at the other end, and there's a McDonald's across the street and a Pizza Hut that way, etc. And when you say, you know, why do you go? It's not because the food's better than the local fare. It's that they want a little piece of America. I look at all those kinds of things of folks trying to get it right, of schools doing programs like yours, of kids I meet who just start up, kids at Davidson College who they didn't have Arabic at the school sufficient to meet their needs, and so what they did was they actually got a group together and they went to Syria for the summer, earned their own money and did it, and are now bringing 10 kids from Syria over to their place for the summer so they can keep the interaction going. Kids at Rice University doing the same thing, and here's my favorite one. A group of kids, high school kids in Cleveland, came up to me at an event I was speaking at, and they come from Chagrin Falls High, which I still want a shirt that says Chagrin Falls. That would actually be quite cool. And they started their own program too. They raised the money. They hired an Egyptian American woman in the community to teach them Arabic, and they're now raising the money to go to Egypt. And when their parents said, but it's dangerous, they said, it's exciting. It's not dangerous. We want to go and see what's going on. And I'm just thrilled. I mean, and on Facebook right now, I mean, we talk about what Facebook, the role it played here, but what we don't talk about is the connection that it provides for kids here to connect with kids there and be linked up in ways where they're beginning to build friends. Not real friends, of course, but Facebook friends. I mean, we have to keep that difference in place. But establishing a connectivity with people in other worlds that I think is so significant. My brother's hope in the work he does is that generation 29 and under is defining our culture and transforming the way we think, and that ultimately the folks who get it right are the kids today, because they're the ones who actually understand diversity and understand tolerance and acceptance of others. They're the ones who most want to learn about other cultures. And so getting it right is something that's happening, and it's quite exciting to look at, and it's quite important to look at, because as I said as I began, we've been getting it wrong for too long, and the divide is getting deeper. And becoming, at times, one fears almost unbridgeable. But I do have hope that with some folks getting it right and a young generation that's actually moving us in the right direction, that we can overcome this. And I thank you for the invitation, and I thank you for what you're doing on this campus to help get it right.